Welcome to Verses and Visions Creative Conversations, where creativity and purpose meet to inspire and uplift. I'm Cassidy Beck, your host, here to explore the stories of artists, dreamers, and changemakers who are walking in faith and using their unique gifts to make a difference. Each episode is a reminder that your vision, paired with God's purpose, can transform the world around you. Let's get started and spark some inspiration together. Delighted to be welcoming Amy Bell. Amy, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this.
I met Amy at a conference and we hit it off right away. I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about Amy. Amy Bell was born and raised in Utah, where she currently lives with her husband and 3-year-old son. She's a system administrator by day and an aspiring writer by night. She's been writing since she was in elementary school and could be found staring at the window during long road trips, writing stories in her head. She hopes to create characters that inspire others to believe in the world around them and in themselves. In addition to writing, she is also the co-host of the podcast, How to Survive Until You're Published. So, Amy, as I am listening to the title of your podcast, and this is something that I've certainly experienced as well, I feel like it is super difficult, that anticipation before you're published. And I think it's very difficult. It seems that you have that same opinion from the name of your podcast. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and where you are in your writing journey?
Yeah, so I feel like me and my friend, we started the podcast just to connect with writers that are just starting out, that are trying to get going. We both mirrored each other a little bit in our journey, especially when it came to finishing our first drafts and just realizing how hard that is to like push through all of those obstacles of getting words on the page and not getting distracted by issues with the book. So we wanted to connect with authors that are just at the beginning. And I've learned since that there is a lot that goes into after you're published, but it's the before that you discover and learn who you are as a writer and what you want your writing career to look like and what your journey is like. And that's a lot to get through. Mostly what we talk about is the craft because we both love talking craft. We also interview a lot of writers and just talk about how they get through roadblocks and things like that. We just want to be real and right there with people who are going through the same stuff we are.
So you mentioned that you are a co-host and that your friend had a parallel journey. How did you find one another?
Oh, so we met at Storymakers, which is the best. I, being the bold person that I am, just went and sat down next to her. It was my second time attending, but first time in person because 2020 was the year previous. I went to the new person little thing they have at the beginning and sat down next to her. Come to find out, her parents lived in the ward that me and my husband were living in. She had grown up in that ward, and I was ministering sisters to her mom, which was really cool. And so we just connected really well on that. I think we're both driven with our writing career and knew what we wanted. At the time, we were writing similar genres. It's just, yeah, it was a really cool experience. She's definitely the ambitious one of the two of us. She had the idea for the podcast and came to me and said, we should start a podcast. I think it'd be fun. The best description for our relationship is she's a Slytherin and I'm a Ravenclaw. So she's the ambitious one. I got the brains and I guess the social talking part of it.
That sounds like a very formidable team for sure. That's crazy. So again, the name of the podcast is How to Survive Until You're Published. And I think my own publishing journey has definitely had some bumps in the road. Is that something that you've experienced as well?
Yeah, my writing journey is a bit different than normal. This may be the same for a lot of people, but I knew since I was a young girl that I wanted to be a writer and that I wanted to be published because it talks about my patriarchal blessing about the gift of writing that I have and that I'll be able to influence others through that gift. And so I knew that was going to be an assignment that I had to use. And so I've approached it with a lot of guidance from the Lord and inspiration, trying to go down the path that He wants me to go down, but also do it the way I want to do it. Because when you think about writing spiritually, you think about all the nonfiction books that the church publishes. And I have the hardest time with nonfiction. I love church books, but I analyze them to death. So they take me like 2.5 years, even just a small book. Takes me a long time. I really wanted to write fiction. I realized that it would be so cool to write stories with gospel principles subtly laid into them that would especially teach youth and young adults lessons that are hard to learn in regular life. Because we've learned, at least I have, through the power of reading and how reading essentially helps you experience things that you don't experience in real life. They've done studies on the brain while you're reading that you are literally experiencing those things. You learn so much while reading because you're experiencing what the protagonist is experiencing. And so I thought, what if I were to put some of those trials and temptations and those things that we have a hard time understanding about the state of the world into these protagonists' lives and give that to our youth and young adults and help them to try to understand that. So I've discovered that's really what I want to achieve. And not that I'm good at it yet or anything, but I'm trying. My first book, I joined a writing critique group that submitted once a week religiously. I had never written a novel before, but all these other writers had. It was a smaller critique group, but they were very brutal. I remember struggling so hard and praying so hard, being like, I don't know if I can do this, like mentally and emotionally, because they were just pounding on me. And I'm a brand new writer. I've written since I was a kid, but learning how to be a novelist is different. I could tell the Lord just said, I need to throw you into the fire. Like, you've got to learn how to do this and you got to learn how to do it quick. But that was the best thing I've ever done for myself, writing that first novel and getting the most intense feedback I've ever gotten. Once I started the second one, I had so much behind my plate already. I knew how to take criticism really well, which is nice. And I learned a lot, especially through going to conferences and things like that. As I wrote my second novel, it took me a long time to discover my characters, their journey, and their purpose. Through that, I learned I wanted to dig into the intricacies of temptation and how subtle Satan can be. Went through many drafts back 2024 in like June. After I had taken a long writing break, I got the impression that the Lord needed me to finish the draft and have it submitted in November. There was a specific publisher I wanted to submit to. I worked really hard, finished a draft, and had to scrap it, start again, and scrap it again. And so that's just the way it goes. And so by the beginning of October, I was ready to start the draft. I was ready to submit. It was like mid-September. So I had to finish the draft before the beginning of November. And then I had to edit in 2 weeks. I have 2 weeks to flash edit. The week that I was preparing to submit was one of the darkest weeks of my life. It was so hard. And I felt so much pressure, so much darkness coming at me. And I knew that I was doing the right thing. I had to press on. It was up till 4 a.m, a few different nights in a row. And also, my awesome friend, that's my co host on my podcast, she used AI and listened to my story and would text me edits that I needed to change. It was the best thing. She got it done in 2 days. She saved my bacon. I was able to go through all of those edits and then a few of my own and was able to get it in the day after Thanksgiving. There was a lot of buildup to that, right? 6, 8 months of buildup. I'm going to get this in and I'm going to watch a miracle happen. I was so excited for that. I've always been one to receive very specific revelation and felt that good things were going to happen because of this. I got a rejection letter like a month later, which was earlier than I felt I was going to. I remember we were helping a neighbor move her couches, and I opened up the email. It was the weirdest feeling. One, yes, this is exactly what was supposed to happen, but also this weird sense of excitement from the spirit. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Mostly I was confused because I thought this was where I was supposed to be going. And now, what does that mean? That was back in January. So the next few weeks, I just felt really confused as to where I was supposed to go. And I'm still kind of in that boat a little bit. I got pregnant back in November, and to moms out there, pregnancy hormones mess with everything, just in general. That was a big thing too, that didn't help. It made me question a lot and it was really difficult. A month and a half after that, I got a blessing from my husband, and it said some pretty specific things about how I need to keep waiting and that things are happening in the background. It's taken a lot for me to put my faith in the Lord on that. It's been really difficult. I've been working on book 2, which has been really fun. And then I want to do an adjacent series. So I've been working on that as well. But yeah, I'm just learning that the Lord definitely doesn't work in the way we think. I've been very humbled in the revelation that I've received, not thinking I know everything and just being patient. The waiting game is the hardest game, in my opinion.
I
So,
agree. It is so hard, especially where you had that specific instruction where
mhm,
you felt like this is the thing and you worked so hard, even though you might not have been aware of it. In the back of your mind, you're like, I'm going to do this. This thing is going to happen. I certainly have built up the thing that's going to happen, like the publishing contract, the audience I'm going to talk to, the book sign, how much more painful it is when you get that letter. And I've gotten those letters too, and it's
yeah,
hard. I feel like that resiliency muscle is one that you like, this thing that we are trying to do is hard and
yeah.
it requires, it demands a lot of resiliency.
Yeah, that was my big thought. I had received this specific impression. And the other hard part was after I received that, I'm like, every author receives a rejection letter. Why do I feel like I'm any different? Why is this so impactful for me? And I think it's because it's just hard. It's a hard thing to do. I wanted to pick myself up and submit to some other agents and some other publishers, but the Lord was like, nope, you just have to wait. And that added another layer of frustration because I felt like I needed to be ready to move forward, but it wasn't time. We're all going to have that as writers, but I guess I didn't anticipate the pain of it. I'm the type of person where I like to be prepared for anything. I just want to be ready mentally and emotionally, but that definitely took me by surprise.
Like there's a special type of vulnerability also that you're like, because this is something that you've worked it at
Yeah.
and you've practiced, you've honed your skill, you've like really developed these things. And where you're putting all this work and then letting someone into that
Hmm.
space, it's particularly vulnerable, I think. And thus, when a rejection happens, it's even that much more painful, in my experience.
No, it's true. That's how I felt after I got the rejection letter. I wanted to will myself to submit, but I didn't feel ready. Like I didn't feel vulnerable enough. Even letting other people read it that could give me good thoughts and feedback, I was just like, I don't know if I can do that. It was just the weirdest thing. But writing is part of your heart that you're giving away. It's different than any other craft, I think. You put so much of your heart and soul into those characters because they are a part of you, and it's something you work so hard on. When you experience something like that, it's like a stab. It's a different level of vulnerability, I think.
For sure. And I have spoken with quite a few artists and musicians that I feel like they're putting the same amount of love and attention that we're putting into our characters. I
Yeah.
also think that they're putting into their craft. I don't know how rejection or feedback or criticism feels to them, but I imagine it feels a whole lot like what we experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, a question that I had for you, has there ever been like a moment where you've questioned whether you think like you're the right person for a work that you feel called to do? You said that you received revelation that was really specific. And so maybe it doesn't feel like where you have something that you're like, you felt like you were called, but you're like, but am I the right person to do this?
I remember there was a period while I was editing that I didn't feel like I was at the right place in my career to be writing this story. It takes seasoned authors to write good novels, right? I like my story and where I want it to go and where I want to take my characters and all of these other things is a big dream, a big want. And I remember just writing and going through and editing and being like, I'm sure I'm a good writer, but I don't feel good enough for this story right now. And that was really frustrating because it's so easy when you read that everything just looks so perfect and precious. And we know it goes through a lot of editing, but I've also come to appreciate that the more you write, the more experience you get and the little bit easier it gets. And so I was just so frustrated that I wasn't farther along to do my story justice. That was really hard. That was part of the Satan temptations he was throwing at me in those dark moments. I wasn't ready for it, and that I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able
Yeah.
to tell the story the way I wanted to.
I've definitely felt that way too. And I think it's hard because part of it is that makes you want to be a better author, right? Because you
Mhm.
have these ideas and you're like, I know that I need to get better. I need to hone my skills so that when I'm at a different phase, then I can tackle this project. I thought that what I heard you saying was that you didn't necessarily feel like an imposter, but that you just felt like it wasn't the right time for
Yeah.
you. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, I wasn't skilled enough as an author and prepared enough.
I have definitely felt that too. I have a project that I'm intentionally waiting on until I get a little bit better. I
Yeah.
wonder if that could be a positive thing so that when my skills are honed a little bit more, then this is a project that I can take on. Maybe that will be like the 10th of never. So
Yeah.
I don't know if this is an advantage because if it's the 10th of never, then that's not really going to help anybody.
Yeah, I guess it depends. I feel like it depends on your perspective and where you're at because sometimes if it's very overwhelming, you're like, yeah, no way, I can't do this. But other times it's made me think maybe I should take a step back and try to focus on something simpler just to build up my craft. I'm the type of person I can't do multiple projects at the same time. I know a lot of people can. I get so dedicated and focused on one thing that I can't divide my brain. I'm a very focused. I've had to hone my ADHD to just be like, okay, we're just going to focus on this and prioritize what I let into my mind. It's hard for me to be like, to derail and to say, okay, we need to change something else now so that you can focus on, so you can come back to this project later. That's always been a hard concept for me. It totally depends. Sometimes it can be good. For me, it's mostly frustrating, but it depends on where I'm at a little bit too.
But I like what you're saying too. And I think that's a skill that is an important one because there was one time when I had 4 or 5 works in process at the same time. Not a single one of them was like really going forward. They were all just like having a little bit of a time and attention. And so I am also trying to just focus on one thing, see that through, go to the next thing. But that's
Mm.
harder to do than I want to admit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's so
No.
many things.
Yes.
Cool thing.
Yeah. No, it's true. After I finished this novel and submitted it, I started the adjacent series that I want to do. And then I've gotten really tired with that. So I started book two. So yeah, I guess I do it to an extent. It just, but right now I'm solely focused on my second book because that's the one I feel like I know what to do with. The other one, I got stopped on the character's purpose and development. I tried writing the first chapter after I'd done a lot of background character work, and I could not figure it out and I could not write it. And these were brand new characters. The second book is not brand new characters, they're characters I know very well. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to backtrack and come back to it. The hopping is not always a bad thing. You can say, I'm going to wait until I'm a little better and come back to that specific struggle, and so that's what I've been trying to do. I've also talked about on my podcast that when you are not motivated to write and in those dark, troubling moments, it is so important to write what you feel passionate about in the moment. what you feel excited about, because part of creating and writing is putting out a piece of your heart and soul. If you don't want to do that, there's no point, and it's not going to do you any good. And it probably won't turn out that great either.
Hey, Verses and Visions family. If you're on a journey to bring your God given visions to life, whether you're an artist, entrepreneur, or simply someone ready to take the next steps towards your dreams, I've got something just for you. Join the Sage Verse Publishing newsletter. It's packed with encouragement, practical insights, and strategies to help you stay focused, overcome challenges, and build role momentum. Let's walk this path together. Sign up today at sageversepublishing.com because your vision matters, and I'm here to help you make it happen. Let's talk about the original soda beer's drink, apple beer. If you know, you know, and if you don't, well, you're in for a treat. Apple beer is a crisp, refreshing drink that's been a family favorite for generations. It's non-alcoholic, smooth, and packed with that perfect apple spice flavor. Whether you're sipping it solo or sharing it with friends, it's always a good time. It's more than just a drink. It's tradition. It's community, and it's about savoring the simple joys in life. So next time you're looking for something special, reach for an apple beer. Now available on Amazon. Cheers to good times and great conversations.
The two characters I'm working with in my second book, I have worked a lot with in the first book. One of them's the villain in the first book. And so I've done a lot of build up with them, and I've been like thinking a lot about their character arcs. And so I've been like, okay, this is going to be really cool. And so I felt a lot more excited and driven to build their stories. So it's been easier for me to write, I think.
It's so hard because you think about all the work that has to go from a blank page to a published novel. There is so much work involved with it. And to have a well written, polished, where each character has an arc and there's development, and especially if it's a part of the series,
Hmm.
there's just so much to it. And I think that it's easy to get side railed on the next fun thing instead of
Hmm.
sticking through, because the creating is fun and exciting. I don't have an editor's brain, and I imagine that editors are like, yes, let's correct all these things and this is out of order, and that would be fun. That's their definition of fun. That is hard work for me. What are your thoughts?
I do not have an editor's brain. Once a month, I do a write night for our podcast. I invite people over to my house and we just write together and talk. And one of the ladies that we love having come over, she's self-publishes, but she's got an editor's brain.
Hmm.
And so she can write and edit her own novels. And
Wow.
it blows my mind. I enjoy self-editing, but I am not good at the nitty gritty. I'm good at the overall general and making sure I pin down the stuff that I really care about, but I overlook everything else just because I don't see it. I think as a writer, having those editing parts of your brain can be hard in the moment too, because that inspiration is harder to come by because you're just thinking about how it needs to be fixed. So I've tried to teach myself how to turn that off in my head. Just say, okay, just create. Don't think about it too much. That doesn't always go over so well, but it's important to be able to do that because you need to get those raw emotions out there. You need to get those raw words out on the page. You need to get those feelings out there, because if you lose the feelings, then there's nothing of the book. There's nothing there. And so that's what I've been trying to teach myself, is just get it out, just get it out. Because your thoughts, your inspiration, like the raw core of the story you want to write, has got to just be there before it's edited, before it's looked at, even by yourself, especially by yourself.
So I
So,
think there's this background in my mind, like expectation that I want to create an impact. Is that something that resonates with you?
yeah.
My follow-up question would be, what does impact mean to you?
So, impact with my writing, it would just be people learning something at the end. I feel like there's a lot of solid, fun books out there that are super fun and that have good themes underneath, but there are other books that have deeper themes and make you think on a deeper level and help you understand the world around you a little bit better from a perspective you hadn't looked at before. And so that's what I want to do, is write those novels that impact on a deeper level with themes that are not what you see every day. In my first novel, I want to write about temptation, about how Satan can work in our brains and things like that. That can be a pretty heavy topic. It's not one that we like to talk about a lot, but I feel like it is so crucial to be able to understand that, especially to youth and young adults who are trying to figure that out. The impact would be learning that lesson through maybe not even learning the lesson, but just thinking about it, just putting those seeds of thought in your mind. Because I've learned a lot about not trying to force an idea down someone's throat, but helping them figure it out on their own, at least planting the seed there. That's what I want to do, is just put the concepts there. And if it doesn't reach anybody, fine. I just want to write it anyway.
So, either from your experience or as a podcast host, what do you feel that you have discussed on your podcast? What do you feel is the most difficult chapter to write?
That is a good question. I guess a lot of people say it's like the middle chapters, right? Some people say it's the first chapter. For me, it's the ending chapters, which the best advice I ever heard was write those first, which is great advice and I love it, but it's hard. At least it's been hard for me to picture the ending sometimes. The reason why is because I'm particular about my character's development arc. I want to get it just right for the character. I want it to be precisely what they're struggling with, and I want to nail it. So understanding where they're going to be at the end, emotionally and mentally, like how everything's going to fit together, has been really hard for me and frustrating. I've had to write the ending a lot to understand where they're at. So that's mine, I think. Sometimes I'll feel like I got it. I think that's the most frustrating part. Sometimes I'm like, yes, I got it. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, no, that doesn't work anymore. And I have to go back and change it. And that's always the part that drives me the most crazy.
So I feel like what I hear you saying is the most important chapter to you is the last chapter. And so you want to write that first, but at the same time, you almost have to go through the character's journey to get to the last.
Essentially, I feel like that works. I want to understand everything that they go through to understand exactly where they're going to be at the end. I can have a vision of where I want them to be. And that's usually what people write. And that's for sure like what I will write at the beginning is where I want them to be at the end. But at the same time, I just want to stay so true to my character and like how they're going to progress and where they're going to progress that even if I write it one time and then I make it 3 chapters into the book, I'm like, oh, wait, this is what's going to happen. And I have to rewrite it. And so, yeah, you're totally right.
I feel like for me, it's the first chapters because there's so much pressure to get those first, especially the first
Yeah,
couple lines, because people are deciding if they pick it up. Most people, they're going to look at the back cover, the
mhm,
front, and then they're going to look for the first couple things, first couple pages, and decide if they want to read the book or not. And
that's
so
true.
I feel like there's just such a tremendous amount of pressure with that. The first bit, the first couple chapters, right?
Totally. I've been reading a lot while taking a break. I'll give it 20 pages
Taster?
before I decide if I want to move on, which is
Like your
hard.
taste
That's,
test.
yeah, that's like hard. That's hard on the writer. It's a lot of pressure. I've rewritten my first chapter at least 15, 20 times, all with similar variations. First liners and end liners are my favorite. I have a lot of fun with just the punch it. I love coming up with those. They're so fun for me. But yeah, it's capturing all of those promises that you are going to fulfill through the book in the first chapter. That's the hardest. When I wrote my manuscript before I submitted it, I wrote a checklist of all of the things I needed to accomplish, all the things I wanted to make sure that I set up in that first chapter. and the promises I wanted to fulfill. This was my eighth draft of the novel. And so I was finally at the point where I really understood what I wanted to do with that. So I don't feel like that's a strategy for really early drafts. But that helped me was I made a checklist and did a little bit of research on what should be in those first few pages and made sure I included those. Yeah, I'm a list person.
That's
I
incredible.
make
That's awesome. That's a good way to do it. Even though you're starting at the beginning, there's stuff going on in your head that you're like, where are we going to start? I already know that this is going to happen, but we got to start this somehow. A lot of times I have noticed that for me, I haven't totally transmitted everything that was going on in my mind onto the page. I think what's nice about having people read your stuff because they're like, now, where is this
yeah.
happening?
No, I'm notorious for that because it's the ADHD in my brain that I miss details so easily. And I'll be like, oh, I thought I mentioned that. I thought I explained that part. Or trying not to over explain and getting that balance just right. That is really difficult. I submitted my first chapter to an editor for feedback at Storymakers, and I was so precise on what I wanted to explain, what background information I wanted to give, because that's one of the biggest warnings of your first chapter. And I got her feedback and she's, yeah, you didn't give me enough. And I was like, like, darn it. I tried so hard.
Is there anything else that you feel like we haven't gotten to that you wanted to share with us today?
Writing is hard, but it's worth it, especially if it's your outlet. I've learned that when I get deep ideas or get passionate about things or I get really excited about like a movie that I'm watching or something, that I want to wrap it up and put it in a book. That's my way of expressing those emotions because my husband doesn't want to hear them all. I don't want to talk his ear off. And it's also my way of understanding the world a little better. However, writing serves you, press on with it because it's not only going to build you, it's going to build your readers. And you'll have the opportunity to help other writers too, because it's not easy. It's a hard journey, but it's worth it. It's a beautiful gift that you've received from Heavenly Father, and it's something that deserves to be out there in the world.
And one of the things I feel like you're such a good example. I think it's really important because this venture we're going on is difficult. And I think that it is really nice to be able to talk to someone that loves the journey, is excited to be on it, but also knows the pain. And
Mhm.
also, I like what you're saying that even though, like, we know that there's bumps on the road, it is a beautiful journey and very fun. You found your co host through a conference and get to share this journey together. For people trying to navigate this, it is really helpful to find your people, to find your tribe.
Oh yeah, totally. I like, and I don't know, I feel like everybody that has gone to Storymakers says this, but it was really Storymakers that kickstarted me. I heard about Storymakers through a friend in my ward. She is more on the editing side, but she was like, you should look into Storymakers. I knew I was ready to get serious about it. And it wasn't until I actually attended that it just kickstarted me into gear. The first year I went was 2020. Everything was online and virtual, and I didn't have any kids. That whole summer, it was like I was taking a full semester of college courses through rewatching these classes that people had taught. I absorbed so much. And next year, I met Megan and other friends, and I just discovered this community of writers and that I wasn't alone and that it, like, you have people that can be there, and just hearing teachers and the people around me and just the motivating parts of Storymakers made such a difference for me. And it changes everything about how you want to write, about the fact that you want to write, like putting yourself in those circles changes anything. To the listeners out there, if you live in Utah, you are definitely invited to my write nights. They're up in Ogden, so they can be far for some of you, but
That's
yeah.
really cool. I also have to ask about LDSPMA because I know you were a volunteer. Are you still
Mhm.
volunteering for them?
Yeah, so I'm on the committee for them. I coordinate all the vendors. And that's a funny story because my ambitious co-host signed us up. I think it was where I needed to be, regardless of how much I wanted it, because it's a lot of work, but I have loved it and it's been really cool to be there. I'm also on the committee for Story Makers, and it's an awesome way to get involved. And especially like just doing low level volunteering, because you don't have to be on the committee. Low level volunteering puts you in circles of people, forces you to meet people. It's a good idea. And there's so many awesome conferences in Utah, really good ones, that you can put yourself in those circles and it helps expose you to more people. And it's just fun. Everybody's going through the same thing and trying to push through it. And the conferences give you a minute to breathe and talk about it and to feel like you're not the only one there. So, yeah, it's great.
All right, Amy, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad I've been able to be on today.
Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and keep bringing your visions to life.